going on?
They confiscated everything, even the stuff we didn't steal.
Ah, thanks. I needed that. Christ. Otter, this is ridiculous.
What are we gonna do?
Road trip.
Welcome to our road trip, the summer of 2023. We started from Charlotte and made the first stop in Morgantown, West Virginia. We stayed at a 100-year-old hotel, the Hotel Morgan. We had a delightful dinner on the river, and we saw the University of West Virginia, where my partner had gone to school. We left Morgantown and drove up past Pittsburgh to Meadville, Pennsylvania. Meadville is where both of my parents were from. The old market house is still there. It's a wonderful place for lunch these days. And this is Allegheny College, where my mother went to school. And we went to the cemetery, where both my grandparents and my mother are buried. Next, we drove up from Meadville past Erie to Chautauqua Institution. Chautauqua is on Lake Chautauqua. It's been there since 1888. They have these beautiful houses where people stay. Our week was about infrastructure. For example, we saw the author of the Lincoln Highway, and we learned about the National Energy Grid. They had these really neat venues for some of the presentations. And each night they had a variety of performances, going from ballet to the symphony to even jazz. We were there with our friends from Charlotte, Ann and Arnold Edwards. We drove from Chautauqua over to the lake country. We stayed at Geneva on the lake. This was the view from our hotel room.
Unbelievable!
Okay. So, how is it?
We did have a delightful 6-course meal there. Then we drove from Geneva to Skaneateles. Skaneateles is a wonderful town. Stephanie would know about that. We found some interesting shops there, and just so happens that we were there on the day of a boat show. It's a beautiful lake. It's probably one of the cleanest lakes in the country. That afternoon, we drove to Williamstown, Massachusetts. Williamstown was cool enough that we actually felt good by the fire pit. It's the home of Williams College. I had a friend from high school who went to Williams. It's a very hard school to get in. We drove across the state of Massachusetts just in time to pick up Liz at the airport. Now, our stay together in Boston will be the subject of an entirely different video. We went from Boston down to Nantucket. And to get to Nantucket, we had to go on a ferry boat. And there we saw our friend from Spring Island, Lucille Hayes. This is some property that Lucille's donated to a trust in Nantucket. And here's our bedroom. I only hit my head on the ceiling twice. The next day we went from Nantucket back to spend the afternoon, as Liz says, on the cod. That evening we had our final dinner with Liz at a hotel in Chatham. Next day we drove from Hyannis, and we felt like we had to stop at Plymouth Rock. They even have a replica of the Mayflower there. We drove back to Boston and did the handoff. where Liz could be with Stephanie's sister's family. We went out to the Colonial Inn in Concord, and we took a kayak on the Sudbury River. This is the most interesting view of the old North Bridge. The North Bridge is the scene of the shot heard round the world. The next day we drove from Boston to Philadelphia. Along the way we stopped in Wallingford, Connecticut to see the Choate School. I had gone to summer school here in 1965. 58 years ago I lived in that bedroom. In Philadelphia we were right on Independence Square. Early the next morning we got up to see the Liberty Bell, and it still has a crack in it. We drove down through Delaware to see an old college friend of mine, Bill Singletary. We used to call him Wild Bill. He's not so wild these days. He's a psychiatrist specializing in autism. From Delaware, we drove down to Norfolk, Virginia, and along the way we rode on the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. It has 3 tunnels. It's 18 miles long, and this is how big boats are able to get through. In Norfolk, we were right across from a naval shipyard, and we took the Elizabeth River Ferry to go into Norfolk. It was a really neat town, and it was a great last evening. Our last day, we drove home to Charlotte, stopping in Durham to have lunch. Well, there you have it. That's our entire journey. A pretty big circle. We went 2,700 miles. It took us 19 days, and we each gained 5 pounds. But it was a great road trip.